The sword rests across his knees, not drawn, not sheathed completely, just there, balanced. The way a question balances between silence and answer. He sits in the burned remains of his family's estate. 3 days the fire took to die. 3 days he sat here, unmoving, while ash settled on his shoulders like snow that will never melt. His brothers are buried beneath stones he carried from the river. His father's armor sits folded beside the garden gate, rust already claiming the edges where blood dried black. A merchant passed yesterday, offered condolences, offered rice, offered to help him leave this place and start again somewhere the smoke doesn't choke the morning. The samurai didn't answer, because the merchant asked the wrong question. He assumed survival was the problem. He assumed a man sitting in ashes needed saving. But the samurai wasn't deciding whether to live. He was deciding how. And that question takes longer. That question requires you to sit in the fire's aftermath until you understand what the fire was teaching. Most men run from the heat. They rebuild quickly, desperately, anything to escape the feeling of standing in ruins. They call it moving forward. They call it strength. The samurai calls it cowardice. Because before you can build, you must let the old structures burn completely. Before you can become, you must sit with what you were and decide if it deserves to rise again. This is where Bushido begins, not in the dojo, not in battle, but in the space between collapse and reconstruction. In the moment a man realizes his life is not decoration, it is architecture. And architecture requires principles that don't bend when the wind comes. Before we continue, sharpen your blade and subscribe. Every video is another step into the old ways. The first principle has no name in modern language. The closest translation is rectitude, but that word has been softened by centuries of politeness. The samurai didn't mean doing the right thing. He meant the bone-deep certainty that turns your spine into iron. The kind of certainty that makes you dangerous to anyone who trades in lies. There's a story they tell about Takeda Shingen's final night. The warlord lay dying, his body finally surrendering to wounds that had been waiting patiently for months. His generals gathered, expecting final strategies, expecting wisdom about the wars to come. Instead, he asked them a question. What did you compromise to get here? Silence. Because they all had answers. They'd all bent, told a convenient lie, ignored an injustice because the timing was poor, made a deal that required them to forget who they'd promised to be. Shingen didn't wait for them to speak. Every compromise is a small death, he said. You kill yourself in pieces, thinking no one notices, but your enemy notices. He can smell the rot where your spine used to be, and he knows exactly where to strike. He died before sunrise, and the next day, 3 of his generals died in battle. Not because they fought poorly, but because they hesitated at the moment. Hesitation means death. They'd spent so long bending that when the moment came to stand absolutely firm, their bodies didn't remember how. Rectitude isn't morality, it's structural integrity. It's knowing that every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you laugh at the joke that degrades you, every time you stay quiet when your blood is screaming to speak, you're not keeping peace. You're creating a fracture, and fractures compound. And eventually, the whole structure collapses, and you'll stand there wondering why your life feels like a house built on sand. The samurai built his life on stone, not because he was righteous, because he understood physics. A man without principles is a man without bones, and a man without bones cannot stand when the earth shakes. The second principle arrives in winter. There's a monastery in the northern mountains where young samurai went to train under a monk who never spoke. For months, they would sit, meditate, practice forms in courtyards where the snow fell so thick it erased their footprints as they moved. One student, arrogant and impatient, demanded to know when the real training would begin. The monk handed him a cup of water, told him to hold it at arm's length until sunrise. The student laughed. Easy. An hour later, his arm was shaking. 2 hours, and the pain was liquid fire. 3 hours, and he was weeping. But he held, because samurai don't quit, because endurance is strength, because he could prove something. At dawn, the monk returned, looked at the trembling boy, took the cup, and poured the water onto the snow. "You held nothing," the monk said. "You endured for pride. That's not courage. That's just ego wearing a mask." True courage, the kind Bushido demands, isn't about enduring difficulty. It's about acting when action costs you everything and gives you nothing in return. It's the willingness to speak the truth when silence would save you. To stand alone when the crowd is warm and you are freezing. To choose the hard path, not because it proves something, but because it's the only path that lets you sleep at night. In 1582, a samurai named Sakuma Morimasa disobeyed a direct order from his lord. The order was to retreat. The battle was lost. Survival meant obedience. But Sakuma saw something his lord didn't. A group of farmers trapped between two armies, about to be slaughtered for standing in the wrong field at the wrong time. He charged, alone, gave the farmers time to run. He survived the battle. Barely. And when he returned, his lord ordered him to commit seppuku for disobedience. Sakuma knelt without argument, because he'd made his choice. He'd traded his life for theirs the moment he turned his horse. The dying was just paperwork. That's the courage Bushido built. Not the kind that roars, the kind that simply moves forward, even when forward means into the knife. The third principle lives in silence. Every samurai understood that cruelty is easy. Any animal can bite. Any coward can hurt something weaker. The test of a man is not what he does when he's angry. It's what he does when he has every right to destroy something and chooses mercy instead. Benevolence, but not softness. There's a difference. A young samurai once came to his master, furious. Another student had humiliated him during sparring, mocked him in front of others, made him look weak. "I want to challenge him," the young samurai said. "I want to prove I'm not afraid." The master didn't look up from sharpening his blade. "You are afraid," he said. "That's why you need to prove it. A man without fear doesn't need witnesses." He set down the whetstone. If you fight him, you win nothing. If you kill him, you lose everything. Because you'll have proven you're exactly what he said you were. A man who needs violence to feel strong. Then what do I do? Nothing. Let him carry the weight of his own cruelty. Let him wonder why you didn't respond. That wondering will eat him slower than any blade. The young samurai walked away. Didn't fight. Didn't respond. And a month later, the other student approached him, apologized, said the silence had been unbearable. Benevolence isn't forgiveness. It's strategic restraint. It's the understanding that the most powerful move is often the one you don't make. That mercy is not weakness. It's a kind of violence that happens in the mind of your enemy, where it can't be seen or defended against. The samurai didn't spare the weak because he was kind. He spared them because he was strong enough to choose, and choice is the only power that matters. The fourth principle is respect, but not the kind that bows. A samurai's respect wasn't polite, it was recognition. The ability to see clearly what something is and honor it without illusion. Respect for your enemy, for his skill, for the fact that he woke up, chose this path, and now stands across from you with the same fire in his chest that you carry in yours. Respect for your weapon, for the 100 hours of labor that forged it, for the fact that it will outlive you and serve the next hand that holds it. Respect for death, not fear. Recognition. The understanding that death is the only certainty, and therefore the only honest teacher. A Ronin once traveled to a distant province, seeking work as a guard. He arrived at a lord's estate, was brought before the lord, and was asked a single question: "Why should I trust you?" The Ronin didn't bow, didn't flatter, didn't list his accomplishments. He said, "Because I've already died. Everything after this is borrowed time, and a man who is already dead has nothing to fear and nothing to prove. He simply does the work." The Lord hired him on the spot, because respect begins with the self. The samurai respected his own death enough to live like it was always standing behind him, one hand on his shoulder. That awareness didn't make him reckless, it made him precise, it made him honest. Because when you know the hour is coming, you stop wasting heartbeats on performances. Respect was the lens through which the samurai saw the world. And the world, seen clearly, is too dangerous and too beautiful to approach with anything less than total presence. The fifth principle is honor, and it will cost you everything. Honor is not reputation. Reputation is what others think you are. Honor is what you are when no one's watching and the choice is yours alone. There's a reason samurai carried two swords. The long sword was for enemies. The short sword was for themselves. Because honor, real honor, demands that when you fail your own code, you don't ask forgiveness. You pay the price. In 1703, 47 Ronin waited 2 years to avenge their master's death. 2 years of silence, 2 years of pretending to be drunks, cowards, anything to make their enemy believe they'd given up. And then, on a winter night, they struck, killed the man who dishonored their lord, and then, without being asked, without being ordered, they all walked to the temple and committed seppuku. Because revenge wasn't enough. They'd broken the law to achieve it, and a samurai's honor doesn't bend for outcomes. It doesn't say, "But the cause was just." It says, "You knew the rule. You broke it, now pay." Honor is the willingness to be destroyed by your own principles. To choose the hard consequence over the easy escape. To understand that your word is the only currency that matters, and once it's spent falsely, you're bankrupt in the only economy that's real. Modern men think honor is optional, a costume for special occasions. The samurai knew it was the skeleton. Remove it and you're just meat. The sixth principle is loyalty, but it's sharper than you think. Loyalty isn't blind obedience. It's not following a man off a cliff because he's your master. It's the commitment to a shared code, a shared vision, a shared understanding of what's worth dying for. A samurai's loyalty was to his lord, yes. But deeper than that, It was to the principle his lord represented. And when that lord betrayed the principle, the samurai had a choice to make. Stay and become a liar, or leave and become a Ronin. Most chose to leave, because loyalty to a corrupt master is just cowardice wearing a disguise. It's the easier path. It's the path that keeps you fed and warm and safe. But it's also the path that turns you into something you don't recognize when you look in the water's reflection. True loyalty requires you to love something more than your own comfort, more than your safety, more than your life. It requires you to bind yourself to a standard so high that it will break you before it bends. But here's the secret. That breaking is the point. The samurai didn't fear being broken. He feared staying whole in a world that required him to be soft. He feared comfort. He feared safety. Because comfort makes you weak, and weakness makes you prey. Loyalty was the fire that forged him, the unbearable heat that burned away everything that wasn't essential, and what remained was a man who could be trusted completely because his word wasn't negotiable. The seventh principle has no mercy. Self-control, discipline, mastery. The samurai understood that external enemies are easy. You can see them, you can fight them, you can win or lose, and know where you stand. But the enemy inside? The voice that says just this once? The desire that whispers no one will know? The weakness that promises you've earned a break? That enemy never sleeps. That enemy knows exactly where you're soft, and that enemy will kill you slower than any blade. The samurai's training wasn't about learning to fight. It was about learning to rule himself, to sit in hunger and not eat, to feel rage and not speak, to want something desperately and choose to walk away. There's a story about a swordsman who trained for 30 years under a master. Every day, the same forms, the same cuts, the same discipline. And one day, a younger student asked him, "Why do you still train? You're already the best. You've already mastered the sword." The swordsman smiled. "I'm not training the sword. I'm training the hand that holds it, and the hand is never finished." Self-control is the understanding that you are not one thing. You are a war, and every day you choose which side wins. The side that wants to grow, or the side that wants to quit. The samurai chose growth. Every morning, every moment, even when growth felt like dying. Because he knew something modern men have forgotten. Comfort is a slow poison. Discipline is the only antidote. The samurai in the ashes finally stands. The sword slides into its sheath. The motion is quiet, final. He doesn't look back at the ruins, doesn't say goodbye to what burned, because what burned was supposed to burn. He walks toward the mountain path, where the trees are so thick they swallow the light. And somewhere in that darkness, he begins again. Not softer, not kinder, not easier, but forged, tempered, unbreakable. Because the code didn't build strong men by making them comfortable. It built them by demanding they become something harder than the world that tried to break them. And the world has been trying for 1,000 years. It hasn't succeeded yet.